Julie Nicole Mott was born on August 15, 1989 in Fort Worth, a city of just over 1 million residents located in Tarrant County, Texas. She was the daughter of Charlotte Mott and Timothy, better known as Tim. The couple was described as dedicated and caring parents. In addition to Julie, they had another child named Jonathan. Julie was born with a genetic condition affecting the lungs and digestive system called cystic fibrosis, which was diagnosed when she was around 2 years old. From a very young age, she needed frequent medical visits and treatments. Cystic fibrosis has no cure. It is an inherited genetic disorder that primarily affects the respiratory and digestive systems, causing thick, sticky mucus that clogs the organs. It is caused by mutations in the CFTR gene, leading to symptoms such as chronic coughing, frequent lung infections, digestive problems like abdominal bloating and difficulty absorbing nutrients, as well as elevated salt levels in sweat. Today, proper treatments exist that can manage the disease, improve quality of life, and extend life expectancy. Despite living with this condition, Julie was described by those who knew her as cheerful and fun-loving. She had a deep fascination with horses. It is said that she spent a lot of time riding and caring for them, something that brought her joy and helped her escape her troubles. Julie tried to live a normal life, but the disease never gave her a break. Then, on August 8, 2015, at the age of 25, Julie Mott passed away due to complications from cystic fibrosis. Julie's parents were deeply shaken by the event. They knew that sooner or later this day would come, but even so, it was something no one can truly prepare for emotionally. They arranged their daughter's funeral at Mission Park North Funeral Chapel, a well-known establishment in the region. This funeral home had been operating for decades and had served thousands of clients. According to sources, there are 14 branches of this funeral home in the city of San Antonio alone. Additionally, Julie's father had known the owner of the funeral home for years, a man named Robert Dixon Tips. He had previously worked for Robert as a private pilot for his jet, and Robert had also rented a house to the Mott family. So Julie's family already had a good relationship with the funeral home's owner, which helped them choose this company to handle the funeral arrangements. Tim signed a contract with the funeral home for $7,500 for embalming and cremation services. The funeral was scheduled for August 15th. The farewell ceremony would mark the end of a lifelong struggle that Julie had faced throughout her life. The cremation was scheduled for the day after the funeral. Everything was proceeding as planned and expected by the family, but after the funeral, something unbelievable would happen. August 15, 2015, was the day of the funeral at Mission Park North Funeral Chapel. Many friends and family members attended to say their final goodbyes to Julie. They also shared memories of her, highlighting how strong she had been throughout the years. Among those who attended Julie's funeral was Bill Wilburn, her ex-boyfriend. According to sources, their relationship had ended about 2 years earlier. However, Bill always tried to stay close to Julie. On that day, some people at the funeral said they saw Bill talking with other attendees and with the staff managing the venue. No one found it suspicious or strange, since Bill had been Julie's boyfriend and had been part of her life, so it made sense that he would want to say goodbye. At the end of the funeral, in the early afternoon, Julie's coffin, still closed, was moved to a side corridor of the funeral home. The cremation was scheduled for the following day. The building where her body was kept was locked at 4:30 p.m. The alarm system was activated as usual, and all employees left. The next morning, August 16th, the funeral home staff arrived to begin preparations for the cremation. However, when they opened Julie's coffin, they were shocked. It was completely empty. One of the coffin's hinges was bent, as if it had been forced open. The rolling support that held the coffin had been moved to an odd position near an exit door, as if it had been pushed or dragged hastily. The strangest part of all was that there was no clue as to how any of this had happened. There were no signs of forced entry on the doors. The alarm system, activated at 4:30 p.m., had not detected anything and therefore had not been triggered. The windows of the building were also intact. It was as if Julie's body had simply vanished into thin air. The staff, completely bewildered, searched the entire building in an attempt to understand what had happened. At that time, there were no security cameras in the building. When they realized that this was a case for the police, they called the authorities. Detectives arrived shortly afterward and quickly realized they had a mystery on their hands. They immediately ruled out the possibility that Julie's body had been cremated or moved to another location by the staff without it being recorded. The detectives had a timeline. The coffin had been closed with Julie's body on Saturday, and by Sunday morning it was empty. Shortly after, Julie's family was informed of the incident. For her parents, it was like losing their daughter all over again. When news of the event spread, people were incredulous. It was hard to believe, especially given that someone had apparently managed to enter the building without forcing any doors or windows, bypass the alarm, and take the body of an adult woman without being seen. It seemed almost supernatural. Someone, somehow, had taken Julie's body from the coffin during the night. The question was, who, and more importantly, why? The police treated the disappearance of Julie Mott's body as a crime from the very beginning. The detectives searched the entire funeral home building. They examined doors, windows, and the alarm system. They found no signs of forced entry, and the alarm that had been activated did not go off during the night. Whoever had entered the building to take the body did so without triggering the system, or was already inside before it was armed. The damaged coffin hinge and the displaced rolling support indicated that Julie's body had not simply been moved, it had been taken out of the building. This did not appear to be an accident. Everything pointed to a planned act. The detectives began asking questions. Who had access to the building? Who had the keys and alarm codes? Who had been present in the hours before the doors were locked? Later, the funeral home offered a $20,000 reward for any information regarding the disappearance of the body. All funeral home employees denied any involvement in the case. They insisted that they had no idea what had happened. In the days that followed, searches were conducted by authorities and volunteers in remote areas of the region. It was then that something macabre was found in McAllister Park, located about 9 miles from the funeral home where Julie's body had disappeared. It was around 10 a.m. when a group of volunteers found human remains in an area of the park. These remains, in addition to being in an advanced state of decomposition, were also burned, which initially made it difficult to determine whether they belonged to a man or a woman. Shortly afterward, the police concluded that the body did not belong to Julie Mott. During my research, I could not find information on whether the body was identified or if a deeper investigation was conducted regarding this macabre discovery. Since the remains were burned, it is very likely that the person had been a victim of a crime. Searches for Julie continued throughout the region, but no trace of her was found. As the investigation progressed, detectives' attention turned to Bill Wilburn, Julie's ex-boyfriend. According to sources, the two had dated for several years. Friends said that over time their relationship became unstable and they eventually broke up. This reportedly happened around 2013, and after the breakup, Julie continued with her life normally. Bill, however, seemed unable to accept the breakup and did not move on as Julie had. Some reports suggest that he had cheated on her and felt remorseful about it. Then, in the 2 years following the end of the relationship, he allegedly tried to win her back. Even when Julie was facing the final stages of her illness, Bill tried to stay in contact with her, hoping she would return to him. According to reports, Bill's behavior after Julie's death suggested that he was not ready to let her go. As mentioned earlier, Bill attended Julie's funeral, and until then, no one found it strange. After all, he was her ex-boyfriend and had been part of her life. What drew attention, however, was his behavior. As guests began to leave and staff prepared the chapel for closing, Bill remained on the premises. According to testimony given to authorities, he was the last person to leave the building. Hours later, when the doors were locked, Julie's body was still inside. In the days following the disappearance of Julie's body, Bill's behavior became even stranger. Funeral home employees reported receiving a large number of calls from him. On a single day, Bill reportedly called more than 100 times, according to the staff. Detectives described him as an extremely obsessive person. During these calls, Bill would ask numerous questions, and when ignored, he would call back, cursing. The staff began to fear him, believing he might try to do something against them. As a result, the funeral home issued a notice forbidding Bill from entering their property. However, this did not intimidate him, and in 2016, months after Julie's body disappeared, security cameras caught him entering the funeral home at night. At that time, there were a few employees on site who recognized him and quickly called the police. When Bill realized the building was not empty, he fled before the police arrived, but was apprehended a few minutes later at another location. In June of the same year, Bill attempted to break into the building again, and once more the police were called and he was detained. Around the same time, after numerous searches and a frustrating investigation that failed to uncover any clue about Julie's whereabouts, the Mott family decided to file a negligence lawsuit against Mission Park Funeral Home. Julie's parents sought $1 million in compensation in a case that dragged on for years. In 2018, Bill Wilburn pleaded guilty before a judge and received a 2-day jail sentence in addition to paying a fine. Bill was still the prime suspect in the disappearance of Julie's body, and his strange behavior made his situation even more complicated. On top of all this, there was suspicion that Bill, using a pseudonym, posted messages online to Julie in a way that was both romantic and morbid. These messages reflected a disturbed mind, incapable of facing the reality right in front of him. Some posts suggested deep mourning and fixation, while others seemed disturbingly detached. That same year, the trial for the lawsuit filed by Julie's parents against the funeral home took place. The funeral home's lawyers claimed that Bill Wilburn exhibited all the symptoms of an obsessive-compulsive personality and that most likely he was responsible for the disappearance of the body. The lawyers emphasized that when he learned Julie was to be cremated, he had strongly opposed it. A mental health specialist said it was very likely that Bill loved Julie in a way that could not bear the idea of her body being reduced to ashes. For Bill, preserving her physical form could have been a way to keep her alive. The arguments accusing Bill of the crime made sense, but the facts did not support all the allegations. Detectives never found any physical evidence linking Bill Wilburn to the theft of Julie Mott's body. No fingerprints, no DNA, no security camera footage, nothing beyond suspicion. The lawyers even brought a replica of the coffin identical to the one Julie was in on the day of the funeral and placed it in the middle of the courtroom for the jury and guests to see. The intention was to show the broken hinges, presented as evidence that the theft had been carried out by someone who did not work at the funeral home, since employees would know how to open the coffin without breaking it. Mission Park's lawyers spent days trying to convince the jury that Bill Wilburn was responsible for the disappearance of Julie Mott's body. They even claimed that Julie's own family suspected Bill. Jonathan, Julie's brother, stated in court that, at the time, he and his family did believe Bill was responsible for the body's disappearance. However, over time, he and his family changed their minds, as authorities had not found any evidence linking Bill to the crime. At the time the body disappeared, Bill's home was searched, but nothing suspicious was found. It cannot be denied that Bill's behavior drew the authorities' attention to him, but most likely he was simply an obsessed individual who never wanted to be apart from Julie. Moreover, if Bill had truly stolen the body, why would he continue going to the funeral home, even risking criminal consequences? It doesn't make sense. Thus, according to Jonathan, despite everything, he and his family came to believe that Bill was innocent and that the full responsibility for the body's disappearance lay with Mission Park Funeral Home. The family believed that in some way, Julie's body could have been lost during a process, and they did not want to admit the error. The funeral home serves numerous clients every month and could have mistakenly buried or even cremated the body earlier than planned. According to sources, errors like these had occurred at the funeral home before, and it would not be impossible for them to happen again. During the trial, another important detail came to light. Robert Tipps, the owner of the funeral home, claimed that his company did not use third-party services at any stage of handling bodies. However, it was discovered that this was false, as Mission Park had, for many years, contracted a third-party company to handle transportation, embalming, and cremation. These outsourced employees had unrestricted access to all Mission Park funeral homes, possessed keys, and knew the codes to disable the alarm. The alarm codes, in fact, had been the same for over 20 years. The keys granting access to the interior of the funeral home were ordinary keys that anyone with access could duplicate. Employees who worked on the day the body disappeared testified during the trial, and all of them denied mishandling Julie's body in any way. One employee, in particular, was the focus of questions because he had a band with disturbing songs that included lyrics referencing corpses. It was suggested that he, along with some members of his band, might have entered the funeral home and taken Julie's body for some kind of ritual. However, there was no evidence that this employee had taken the body. It was all purely speculation. At the end of the trial, the jury found Mission Park Funeral Home guilty of negligence. It was decided that the Mott family should be awarded $8 million instead of the $1 million they had originally requested. This was because the court considered the loss of Julie's body to be an extremely absurd event, causing the family to experience the pain of loss twice, first when Julie died, and second when her body went missing. The trial lasted nearly 3 weeks, and on the last day, when the sentence was delivered, Tim and Charlotte could not be present because Tim had suffered a heart attack and had to stay home to recover. Mark Greenwald, the family's attorney, was present to represent them. Later, the family issued a statement saying they were happy to have obtained a favorable verdict from the jury, but ultimately they had failed, as they had not found Julie, and that was all that truly mattered. Sometime later, the family reached a settlement with Robert Dixon, the owner of the funeral home. According to sources, they agreed on a compensation amount satisfactory to both parties. This amount was not made public. Bill Wilburn was not charged with anything beyond trespassing. Although there is no evidence linking him to the disappearance of Julie's body, some people still believe he might be responsible. To this day, it remains unknown what actually happened to Julie's body. The most likely hypothesis is that it was misplaced by the funeral home staff due to an internal error. But what do you think really happened to Julie Mott's body? Was it an internal mistake at the funeral home, or was it taken by someone from outside? Share your opinion in the comments. Thank you very much for watching until the end, and I'll see you in the next video.